Now we'll start, and I'll ask you about on your dad's side of the family. Who was your dad's? You don't remember your dad's, or you never heard you ever hear your dad ever talk about his grandfather?
On the mother's side only.
Only on the mother's side. Okay. What did he do?
He was vice president of a brewery in St. Louis, but I can't remember which one.
How long did he live?
I don't know that either. I remember seeing my great-grandmother, got a picture of her with when I was little, but I don't remember her that much. I was only, about 4 years old.
You don't know how long she lived either? Okay. Well, then how about your grandparents on your dad's side?
Well, I remember my grandmother and my grandfather, but...
on your dad's side?
Yeah.
Now, what were their names?
Lydia Bowley, Heien, and Ben Heien.
And how long did they live?
Well, let's see. I think they died in the 60s.
And when in their 60s?
No, in the 60s. I think they died. Your dad went to Mount Olive to the funeral of my grandfather, but I don't remember when it was. It was in the 60s sometime.
Okay, how old do you think they
were? Probably in their 70s, I imagine, when they died.
Then,
but I don't remember much about them because I never visited them that much.
Your grandparents, you never didn't see that much.
Uh-uh.
Well, how about weren't they big, tall?
No, my grandfather on my dad's side was a little man. His brothers were great big men, but he was little. My grandmother was sort of a big woman.
I thought I saw pictures of your granddad's sisters. I mean, no, it would have been your dad's sisters.
No, my dad never had. He had one brother.
Who was it they showed me that was on his side of the family that was real big? I thought I saw some real big women.
No.
He didn't have any. He was only 6-footer.
Well, no. His dad, my grandfather, had brothers that were real big men. Were 6'6" and like that.
Well, sister, did he have?
He never had any sisters. My dad only had one brother. He was about the same as him.
His brother was as big.
About like Dad. His name was Bernard. And he had one daughter named June. She just came out to California and visited Don.
Okay, then on your mother's side, how about do you remember any great grandparents on her side?
They were in Germany. Because my grandmother came over to this country when she was 14, I think, or something like that. She got married when she was 14.
Well, you remember, on your mother's side, you remember both your grandparents there.
Oh, sure.
Their names were what?
Alma Dratwick. But no, let's see. What was her maiden name? All of a sudden, Walters, I think. Alma Walters Dratwick. And John Dratwick.
Now, how long did he live?
He died when he was 79.
79, and how long was your...
My grandmother lived to be over 100, 3 months over 100.
When did they come from Germany?
When my grandmother was about 14, I think before she married Papa, because he was about 12 or 13 years older than her.
And then they came to Illinois?
No, they lived in Pennsylvania, and they lived in Tennessee, and they lived in West Virginia. My mother was born in Tennessee, in Shawnee, Tennessee.
How about on your dad's parents? Were they all from Illinois, or
around St. Louis? Yeah. Because I had uncles and aunts lived in St. Louis.
And your grandmother had how many kids?
She had 10 children, but she had 4 that died when they were little, and she only raised 6. And she had twins that died when they were babies, and she had 2 girls that died of scarlet fever. and then Mom and Dell are the only ones living out of 10 kids. So.
There was then, and then how old's Dell? She's younger than.
No, Dell's 69, either 69 or 70. I don't know which. She's either 4 years older than me or 5. I can't remember. I think maybe 4. I think maybe she's 69. And Mom's 84.
And then your mother had how many? She had how many births did she have?
She had 2 boys and 2 girls. And Elroy died when he was 21 months old. And Don is, let's see, Don is 50. See, Don's 57 and Joy's 63.
Your grandmother husband, his name was John.
Mm-hmm.
What did he do? What occupation?
He was a miner.
Coal miner.
Yeah.
And your dad's side mostly was in the brewery business.
No, his dad was a coal miner.
His dad was a coal miner too.
Yep.
And most of them they were from Mont Olive too.
Yeah. But they were
How did your dad and mother meet?
My dad ran around with my mother's brothers, and they eloped when Mom was 17 and Dad was 20. And Mom never went with anybody else. He eloped, met him just because he come see her brothers all the time. Never did go with anyone but him. And he worked at the Wabash in Mont Olive. Once upon a time, they ran a store in Mont Olive too. I got pictures of it. You remember seeing pictures of them when they ran the store? I got some really good ones.
They ran a store, and then he went into the train.
He worked in the depot in Mont Olive. I used to go up and he'd work the trains, do the telegraphy and all that kind of stuff. And then one time we moved after we lived in Mont Olive. We went to Blue Mound, Illinois, and then we went to Decatur when I was 6.
And he was still working the trains.
Yeah.
The Wabash.
Yeah. And then my brother died. The one that died when he was 21 months old died after we moved to Decatur. As soon as we got to Decatur, we hadn't lived there a month, and he died.
He died of what?
He had a spasm.
Crib death?
No, he had a spasm. Had convulsions.
Probably.
Yeah, well, he fell down the basement in a stroller about a week or so before he died. So Mom thought maybe that killed him. She didn't know. Back then, they never checked. He died on the way to the Wabash Hospital.
Then your dad, your dad went from being working on the train, Wabash, to going in the tavern business. How did he do that?
Oh, well, he worked at the accounting bureau in Decatur for a long, long time, years ago. And then Uncle Andrew, Dell's husband, lived in Maroa, so he wanted Dad to buy that tavern with him. So Dad put up the money, and Andy had to get the license because he lived in Maroa. So Andy worked for Dad, but Dad had to give him part of the business. And they ran that together for years. I don't know how long time. And Mom ran a restaurant too. She ran a restaurant for a long time.
Well, he didn't own that when. Did he own a part of it when she was running the restaurant too?
Yeah.
For quite a few years then.
Yeah, long time.
When did he get out of it completely?
I can't remember. I quit. Your dad knows. He knows all the dates. I don't know any of the dates. Shoot. Never pay attention.
Okay, then you grew up, how much younger was your sister than you?
21 months.
So then you guys went to school together?
Well, yeah, pretty much so. I went to school in Mount Olive with Dell and Christine, and then because Dell and Christine lived with us. Then after we come to Decatur, they lived with us, and then Christine graduated from Decatur High School.
Did you go to? I mean, with your sister, was she? I mean, you.
We were like 2 grades apart in school.
Did you chum around together?
No, not really. Well, we had some girlfriends who was the same, but not much.
But you didn't fight or anything like that.
No, of course not.
You say that to the older age.
Still doing that.
How about so then what kind of grades did you get in school?
Well, I got pretty good grades. I skipped a grade in school. Graduated when I was 17. Then went to work in a doctor's office and a dentist's office.
Well, how about in high school? What did you do in high school? Did you?
Not much.
Were you on any kind of
Oh, I used to be in
functions?
a lot of operettas and stuff like that. But when I was in junior
How
high
about
school.
boys? Did you go out with the boys?
No, my dad didn't let me go out too much.
So you didn't do any dating?
Well, I did because we played. We used to play. Mom and Christine and Dell and I used to go and play at the state fairs. And then when I was about 14,
how'd you get?
One time we went to be. They had WLS barn dance came down and we tried out for it, and I tried out as Patsy Montana, and they tried out as the Oklahoma Cowgirls, and we played there, and then from then on we got to playing. And when I was in junior high school, I used to imitate Lula Bell. Of course, nobody knows those people anymore. They were on WLS, and Mom and Christine and Dell used to go to WDZ and play when they knew Smiley Burnett, and then they went and they knew Gene Autry. They played at WLS some shows. They knew George Goebel and a lot of them. And
so they just started off doing state fairs.
Yeah, and then we did some state fairs, Springfield, and then they went on a road show where they played in Michigan and around the Oklahoma Cowgirls. They started out as the White Sisters. I can remember when they did that when Donnie was a baby. And then when I was 14, I went with them and we played different places. We had a bunch of.
What did you do?
Well, I sang with a guy, and we were called the Rubes, and I was called Ruby, and he was called Rube. That was a long time ago, and then.
So you sang? You want to do a little song for us?
No, thank you. And then I tap danced, and then I played the ukulele, and then I played the washboard, and.
How old were you when you were doing this?
About 14. And
how long did you do it? Till when?
Oh, till I was about 17, I guess. We used to play different places.
Well, then that's when you probably met boys.
Yeah. And I never did play after I met your dad. I never have even played for the ukulele or nothing for it. Never.
In other words, Dad never ever saw you do it.
No, not really. Mom still got her harmonicas and everything. She had a great big one this big. It's got 4 different keys on it. She could really play it. They were real good. Dell was a real good singer. And but there wasn't any television, and they played on the radio. We played on the radio for different things. Used to have Saturday night barn dance and stuff, but it wasn't like the television days today. For sure.
So you did that from about 14 to
about 17 or something like that. Then when I graduated for high school, I went to work in Dr. Strickling and Dr. Coonrad's office. Worked for them until I met your dad. Then I quit working.
You had a hot number before you met Dad.
Well, I'm not going to talk about those kind of things on camera.
This is a history.
No, thank you. I don't think we need to talk about all of it.
So how did you meet Dad?
At a dance one time. That was
a
long time ago.
He told me about that, so I don't have to ask you about that.
No.
What do you mean now?
That was during the war. The big war. The big war that was.
So then he left you with barefoot and pregnant.
Sort of.
And he went off to war, and you had the had Chuck by yourself, right?
Yep.
Now, how'd that all come about?
Lived at Mom's and well, I just lived at Mom's. What are you coming in here for, nosing around? Now, I didn't do that to you. And I don't know anything, and it's a little...
I don't know where we met. I said, well, we met.
Okay, now I got it. Okay. When, let's see, what was that? Oh, you were living with your mom and Dad, and Dad left you barefoot and pregnant.
Oh, gosh. I guess. We lived in, well, he probably told you all the places we lived. The time we lived.
I'm talking, he didn't talk about you. He talked about him.
Well,
where did you,
who'd you
live with?
Before he went overseas?
Pregnant, when he was over in Africa.
Well, I lived at Mom and Dad's.
And you had Chuck, right?
Yeah, that's right. Lived there until he come back. That was it.
Who took care of Chuck the whole time?
Well, I did. Except everybody, Mom and Dad and Joy and everybody else telling me what to do. That was for sure.
So you had all kinds of help.
Yep, I had lots of help. Spoiling him. He was spoiled rotten.
So you went in the hospital. When you were in the hospital, had him. How long did you have to stay in the hospital then?
Oh, 11 days, something like that.
Oh, 11 days for a baby.
That's right. Wasn't like it is now.
Oh, you could have been. So you went in the hospital for 11 days to have Chuck. Of course, Chuck was pretty good size. How big was he?
Well, he wasn't so big. He was about 8.5 pounds.
8.5 pounds.
He was smaller than Keith, that was for sure.
So then Chuck got all the attention while Dad was away. You had everybody.
Everybody spoiled him. Yep, Iris spoiled him. Everybody spoiled him. And then the funny thing was, when your dad come home from the army, we moved to Dallas, Texas. We got ready to go. My dad said, I don't want you kids going to the show and leaving Butch by himself while you go, because he was so upset because we were going. He was so upset because he didn't want us to take him away, and he thought it was terrible we were leaving. Then when we went, Butch was so spoiled, and we got there, and he wouldn't go to bed by himself or anything. And then when we came back, why, he didn't know everybody and nobody. And then everybody was mad because he didn't know him. He called my dad and everything before we went because he didn't know his own dad. And when your dad come home from the service, I said your dad was coming on the train at 4:00 in the morning, and everybody said, "Oh, you have to take Butch to the train with you." And I said, "Oh, I don't know if I should." Yeah, you got to take him with you. He's waited 2 years to see him. And I met him at the train, and Butch hollered and screamed and bawled and yelled and just hated him. And took his toys when he got home and broke them on the floor. Want anything to do with him. So it was a traumatic experience.
How old was Chuck?
He was about close to, let's see, he must have been, I think your dad come home in April when Roosevelt died. Got off the plane and Roosevelt had just died. So, which must have been, I think it's the story of my life. Everything happens that way, but I think he was 21 months old when he come home. So, he pretty much was talking and everything like that.
He hadn't seen Dad.
He'd never seen him. He'd never seen any guy around me.
He hadn't seen Dad in 2.5 years, and you took Chuck with you, and all he did was scream.
All he did was scream and holler, and he just hated him. And Grandma Rinehart felt so bad because he didn't want anything to do with his dad. He just didn't know who he was because he thought my dad was his dad. He called him Dad all the time. He called Grandpa Rinehart Namper, and he called Iris Arse.
So then you had, let's see, the next two were me and Keith. How about the three of us? Who was the easiest one of us to have? Who was the
Well, probably you were the easiest because You and were always real good. You never
No,
were.
I'm talking about birth-wise, as far as
Oh.
going through the labor.
Well, I can't say about that either.
You know,
That was pretty bad, all three. But
you spent a lot of time in labor.
well, quite a while, because when you were born, your dad went home to fire the furnace. I remember that because it was in February. And I was in the Catholic hospital, and those sisters kept saying, you know, when you were born, they said, I said, I was going to name you Vicky Joe. And they said, oh, it's not a Vicky Joe. And he said, name him George. I said, oh, I wouldn't dare. So it was George before I met your dad.
Because of George Washington.
Yeah.
But then there wasn't you didn't have any quick ones. I mean,
No, not any quick ones, especially with Keith. He was so big.
Took you a long time to have him.
Yeah, he was a big boy. But, well, he weighed 9.5 pounds, I guess. It wasn't so big, but big enough. But, but you and Keith were good babies.
Back then, though, when you went to hospital,
because Butch was so rotten.
You didn't have any. Dad didn't come in and watch or.
Oh heavens no! Heavens no! He would have had a fit anyway.
He didn't do anything.
He would have passed out anyway.
Then what did they do then? They just put you under. Didn't you take gas or something?
Oh, well, they didn't give you anything till right the last minute. They never did until they gave you gas. Yeah, that's what they did.
So then you went to you had Keith, and then didn't you have to work for a while? Was that after Keith? You had to go back to work, and Dad had a heart attack.
Well, I did a long time after that. I was sick after Keith was born, but then I went up one time and I worked for Picture Craft and put those little paints in tubes, paint by number.
That's a good one. You got sick. You had because it's good for the history for the girls. You had a hysterectomy, right?
Yeah, when Keith was 4 months old. So.
Was that due to endometriosis?
Well, no. I had endometriosis afterwards. I had an operation for that in Traverse City.
Oh.
Later.
Then they left.
After your kids were.
They didn't take the ovaries.
Not then, no.
Mm-mm. Then it wasn't a complete hysterectomy.
No, partial then. But I worked for Picture Craft. Let's see. Then I worked for Dr. File, psychiatrist, one time for a while. But you boys, that's when we lived in the other house. When you went to Lincoln School, that's when I worked for Dr. File.
What did you work for? That was when Dad was sick.
Yeah, then I worked for him, and he died. Dr. File died.
And then you didn't have it. All the rest of the jobs you had was housewife up until you worked with as a secretary for.
Yeah, I never did work any other place then.
Well, you worked as a secretary at Traverse City.
Well, yeah, I did then. I worked in Traverse City, and then I worked here in
Who did you work
for in
Traverse City?
I didn't work for anybody but Dad. I didn't get any salary. Just as well.
Slave labor.
Slave labor, yeah, right. That's about it.
So then, let me see. When did you learn how to drive? We were talking about that.
Well, that I told you back in Decatur, when we lived on Locust Street.
How old were you then?
Took driver's training. Well, how old was I? How old was I? Let's see. Butch was born when I was 9. No, Butch was born. Got married when I was 18. Butch was born when I was 19. So I must have been about 24 or 5.
Who learned to drive first, you or Joy?
Well, my golly, I did.
Okay. Then you must have been how about, you were the first woman. How about the Iris and Alice? Were they driving?
Why, no.
Back then, the women didn't drive.
Well, Iris is younger, and Alice never did. she sent off in Illinois for a driver's permit, and they sent her a license. How about that?
But I'm saying your mother didn't learn how to drive. Your
No.
grandmother,
No,
Dad's mother, none of the women back then drove.
no. No, they didn't. Nobody
When you were in
drove.
high school, none of the women drove.
Well, in high school, there was girls that drove that lived on the West End, but people didn't have cars. Not that many. We never had a car. How would I ever driven? Your your dad's grandpa and them, they had cars, but we never did have any car. My dad never had a car when he was working the Wabash. He drove or rode a bicycle to work, or walked. Most of the time he walked. So.
Well, okay.
I don't know.
Anything else? What else I say?
I don't know.
Oh, how you had you got arthritis. How old were you when you got arthritis?
Well, I lived in here in Columbus, and Dr. Sparks took a. I always had my physicals with him, and I took a physical, and he called me in, and he said, "I can see by your blood that you're probably going to get arthritis, and I can't tell you when, but it's in your blood. You're going to get it. I can't tell you what kind." And it wasn't any more than about 2 months after that I started having trouble with my neck and my arms and my wrists and stuff. And so it must have been about, let's see, about 12 years ago, I imagine.
In the 77?
Probably about that.
And that would have made you how old?
Well, would have made me about 53, something like that.
53.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, you sure don't have anything else? Are you sure you don't want to do a song or a dance?
No, thank you.
Nope. You don't want to do anything.
I can't remember nothing, so don't do it.